Okay, let's dive deep. We have in front of us today a really fascinating piece of historical narrative excerpts from what looks like a script detailing a truly pivotal moment, a critical first encounter
Hmm.
between groups who, according to this source anyway, had previously known each other only through, well, conflict, and had never actually seen each other face to face.
Which is just wild to think about.
Right. So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack this historical account. We're going to pull out the key moments, the strategic decisions made under, unimaginable pressure, and really try to understand the underlying tensions, the historical baggage that defined this initial interaction between vastly different groups.
And what's crucial to understand, I think, is that this isn't just some dramatic story we're looking at.
Mm.
As it's presented here, it's basically a case study in navigating the absolute unknown
And
under the highest possible stakes, especially when that unknown suddenly, manifests right on your doorstep. Adjacent to a really sensitive, volatile border, like this neutral zone described in the text. So we're going to meticulously explore the limited information we have about the players involved here. Try to piece together their motivations based only on what this script actually gives us.
Mm-hmm.
And analyze the incredibly high-stakes choices that were made in, well, probably just a matter of minutes, really, with potentially galaxy-altering consequences hanging in the balance.
And just to be absolutely clear, for this deep dive, we are sticking strictly, rigidly to the information provided in this source material. Okay. We are treating this script as the definitive, factual account of these events that we're here to analyze. Think of it as our primary, maybe our only historical document for this specific exploration. So get ready to jump in with us. So the narrative kicks off in a place that seems almost, deliberately designed to contrast with what's about to happen. We start not with a military briefing or anything like that, but with a moment of, well, peace. Even celebration. There's a wedding ceremony taking place aboard the ship.
Yeah, a moment of human connection, looking forward.
Yeah.
Life, really.
Exactly. And that sense of calm, of ordinary life just carrying on is just violently shattered. The source describes the sudden, jarring intrusion of alert alarms.
Right. And the initial reports filter in, and they're concise, but just chillingly effective in conveying the speed of this disaster unfolding. Outpost number 2 goes silent. An hour later, number 3. And then the most immediate and, frankly, terrifying report, Outpost 4 actually calls in, reporting being under attack right before it, too, goes silent.
And the text really emphasizes the sheer destructive power and speed of this attack. The stations weren't just disabled, they were, quote, pulverized.
Pulverized, yeah.
And this destructive energy apparently penetrated even through our deflectors, which you'd assume were their primary defense, right?
Yeah.
It's just a sudden, devastating blow delivered with overwhelming force.
And it's this immediate, brutal efficiency that makes the historical context, as the source lays it out, so incredibly significant and alarming. The text explicitly references the Earth-Romulan conflict of over a century ago, but it wasn't like, later conflicts we might read about.
Right. The script really goes out of its way to characterize that earlier war. It says it was fought with, quote, primitive atomic weapons and in primitive space vessels.
Primitive tech, primitive methods.
And the methods were absolutely brutal. It allowed no quarter, no captives. But the most astonishing detail, the thing that really defines it, is this. No ship-to-ship visual communication.
None.
For the entire duration of that conflict, neither side had ever seen the other face-to-face. Just think about that for a second.
It creates this profound, century-long void of direct personal knowledge, doesn't it? The image each side had of the other was built entirely on the abstract brutality of war, on secondhand reports, on assumptions, fear.
Totally. The source explicitly states Earth's view of the Romulans that came from this. Warlike, cruel, treacherous. That's what they thought.
But what the Romulans thought of Earth, the source just says, only the Romulans know what they think of Earth. So this complete lack of visual contact, this long history of violent interaction without ever seeing the face of your enemy, it just deepens that chasm of mistrust and assumption to an incredible degree.
Yeah, it makes the enemy almost mythical, doesn't it? Like a monster you've created in your own head, fueled by fear and rumor over generations.
Exactly. And that war, that century of unseen conflict, it ended with a treaty, established, kind of surprisingly, by subspace radio.
Right, subspace radio. And this treaty basically drew a line in space. It created the neutral zone, and the rule governing this zone was absolute, and its meaning couldn't be clearer. Entry by either side constitutes an act of war, period.
And the source highlights that this treaty had been unbroken since that time. A whole century of tense, silent peace maintained by this single, inviolable boundary.
Which brings us right back to the present moment in the narrative, because the attack on these outposts isn't just, a hostile act. It's a clear, undeniable, and frankly monumental violation of that century-old unbroken treaty.
Yeah, it immediately raises the specter of that old war starting all over again, but this time potentially with far more advanced, more destructive weaponry on both sides.
And the gravity of that situation hits the ship's command immediately. You can feel it in the text. Their mission instantly shifts. They were just on patrol, maybe routine patrol, and now they're directed to investigate the loss of Outpost 4, assist if possible. But the captain's orders are incredibly strict, almost unbelievably so, given they've just been attacked. They are precise and inviolable, and the core directive: no act, no provocation will be considered sufficient reason to violate the zone.
Wow, even under attack.
Even under attack. The text even reveals that the ship itself, and even the outposts that were just destroyed, are considered expendable if their loss is the price of avoiding intergalactic war.
That creates an almost unbearable tension, doesn't it? You're under attack by a clearly powerful, unseen enemy, but your hands are completely tied by treaty obligations in this paramount order to prevent a wider conflict at almost any cost. I mean, how do you even fight back when your primary directive is essentially don't escalate?
It's an impossible bind, completely. And it's right in this moment of confusion and fear that we get the first hint, the first description, really, of the attacker. And it comes through a character named Styles.
Styles, yeah.
Who filters his perspective through what he calls family history. He says, they're painted like a giant bird of prey. But it's not just the description, it's the immediate, almost visceral aggression in his tone. His unquestioning certainty about who they are and what they're like. He's ready to fight that century-old war right now.
And that immediate aggression, that sort of channeling of past conflict into the present moment, is met with a sharp, necessary rebuke from the captain, doesn't it?
Yeah, instantly. Their war, Mr. Styles, not yours. Don't forget it. It's such a quick exchange, but it's so telling. This encounter isn't just a military problem to be solved with tactics and tech. It's instantly layered with this deep-seated personal and historical baggage for some members of the crew.
Exactly. Styles really represents that century of fear and prejudice passed down through generations who never actually saw their enemy. It shows how easily that old conflict can color perception and, breed prejudice, even among those who weren't alive to fight it. Then we get the crucial direct report from Outpost 4's Commander Hansen just before his signal cuts out. He confirms the nature of the attack.
Right.
An unknown weapon completely destroyed them. He reiterates its enormous power. It blew our deflector shield.
Right.
And critically, he provides the first major piece of the tactical puzzle. The attacker disappeared somehow.
It's disappeared. That's the key.
Yeah. He describes the weapon as some form of high-energy plasma. Fantastic power. And his final moments, his sensors still indicate it's out there somewhere, just lurking nearby, invisible.
And that report, disappeared somehow, is immediately relevant because the Enterprise then detects the attacker on its own sensors, just a blip that is only briefly visible, quote, in just a moment when they open fire, and then vanishes again.
Right.
And the captain immediately connects the two observations. Becoming visible, he speculates, might be necessary when they use the weapons.
And this brief sighting, followed by the disappearance, triggers the discussion about their technology. Invisibility is brought up as, a theoretical concept, maybe achievable through selective bending of light. But the known challenge, the thing that stops everyone from doing it, is the enormous power cost.
Takes too much juice.
Exactly. Then, the science officer on the bridge makes the critical connection. The Romulans may have solved that problem. And this links directly back to Commander Hansen's description of the weapon having fantastic power. So the theory emerges that perhaps the invisibility system and the weapon aren't totally separate functions, but maybe they're linked, drawing from the same incredibly powerful core source. The technology isn't just a tool they use. Its nature, its limitations become a key part of the tactical puzzle for the Enterprise. I mean, how do you fight an enemy you can't see unless they choose to show themselves to attack?
And adding another slightly more sinister piece to that puzzle, after the attack, the blip on the sensor, the Romulan vessel, changes heading. It moves to 11 Mark 14, and the captain immediately recognizes this heading.
Yeah.
It's the exact heading a Romulan vessel would take toward the neutral zone and home.
Ah, So they're retreating.
It suggests they hit the outposts, and now they're running for home, heading back towards the perceived safety of their side of the border. They struck, and now they're making break for it.
And that leads directly into the strategic maneuvering, doesn't it? The high-stakes game of cat and mouse that really dominates the next phase of this narrative. Kirk's initial decision, once they detect the vessel, is incredibly cautious. Almost passive, you could say, but deeply strategic.
How so?
He orders the ship to match course and speed with the object on our sensors.
Exactly.
Move for move, every turn, every change in speed, they're just mirroring the Romulan ship perfectly.
And he explicitly states his reasoning, right? If he has sensors, I want him to think that we're a reflection, an echo. He's trying to trick them.
Exactly, trying to make them question whether they're really being pursued or just seeing some kind of sensor ghost, a phantom image of themselves. It's a brilliant, non-aggressive probe.
Yeah, it really is. And it highlights his immediate focus on probing this unknown enemy without overt aggression, while rigidly respecting that treaty boundary. He repeats the crucial order: under no circumstances are you to cross into the neutral zone without my direct orders.
Which is such a stark contrast to Styles' earlier,
Yeah.
gut reaction to just attack.
Totally different approach.
Kirk is playing a longer, much more complicated game here, totally constrained by the geopolitical reality of that neutral zone.
And remarkably, the source material actually gives us this fascinating window into the Romulan perspective. It confirms Kirk's tactic was, initially at least, successful.
Really?
Yeah, we hear their internal dialogue. They see an Earth vessel follows us, which neither retreats nor grows near and turns as we turn. Their initial interpretation, just as Kirk hoped, a reflection. The deception worked for a moment.
But the Romulan commander, he isn't entirely fooled, is he? He trusts his instincts, which tell him something's not right. He says, my judgment prevails. He feels they're being followed. And we get this incredible glimpse into their world, too. They express concerns about fuel use for the cloak. It consumes much power, Commander. There's a clear longing for home. Not too soon for me to see the stars of home.
And the commander analyzes the Earth captain's actions. He says, if I were their commander, that is what I would do, referring to that persistent, mirroring pursuit. He mentions his commander sent for him, a message was dispatched, indicating they weren't just out on a random patrol.
Right. And the Centurion voices concerned about breaking their rule of silence by sending that coded message. Even if it was secure, it shows, internal dynamics, a chain of command, rules they normally stick to.
This Romulan commander, he's portrayed as shrewd, experienced, maybe even a touch arrogant or reckless. He sees the pursuit not just as a threat, but as a test.
A test.
Yeah. His explicit goal, stated in the text, is to test the Earthmen's weakness. And his stated intention when he gets home is crystal clear. Trigger another war.
Wow. Okay, so he isn't just a soldier following orders. He seems actively hostile, like he's seeking conflict.
It seems that way from this text. The stakes are revealed to be incredibly high from their side, too. This wasn't just a hit and run on some outposts. It was potentially the catalyst for a wider conflict they were actively trying to start.
But even within this apparently aggressive group, there's that note of weariness, isn't there? The Centurion expresses that stark perspective. Obedience, duty, death, and more death.
Yeah, that's a powerful line.
It really is. It suggests maybe not everyone on the Romulan ship is uniformly enthusiastic about constant conflict. There's a hint to the personal toll, even for the attackers.
Then the narrative throws in a curveball, an unexpected environmental factor that completely changes the tactical game. The discovery of a comet, described simply as magnitude 7 dead ahead.
Right, and the ship's sensors analyze it, an ionized mass, a trail of frozen vapor particles. But the science officer immediately gets its significance. This chaotic environment presents the first real potential tactical opportunity against that invisible ship.
Why is that?
Because, as the analysis reveals, when an object passes through it, even an invisible object, it leaves a visible trail.
Ah, like footprints in snow.
Exactly. Suddenly, the game changes completely. They have a way, maybe the only way, to force the Romulan ship into visibility, at least for a moment. The plan forms fast. Use the comet's tail. The captain orders an end run, gentlemen. We'll swing around the other side and catch him at that moment. They plan to use the comet as cover to maneuver, then ambush the Romulan ship as it passes through that revealing trail.
Clever. But the Romulan commander, thinking tactically himself, also sees the comet. And he sees it not as a threat, but as his opportunity. He thinks its particles will obscure their sensing device. He believes it will provide cover from the Enterprise.
So he wants to hide in it.
Yeah. essentially. He orders them to enter it, Commander. His plan is the opposite of the Enterprise's. He wants to use the comet's obscurity to turn suddenly back upon our adversary once they're hidden inside. An ambush from within the cloud.
Wow. Okay, so we have this incredible situation. Both ships, locked in this unseen pursuit, are heading for the same comet. Each captain sees it as a tactical advantage, a place to make a decisive move, but with completely opposite goals.
One trying to reveal, the other trying to conceal an ambush. Intense.
The Enterprise attempts its end run, swinging around the comet, waiting for the Romulan ship to pop out as it enters the trail. But it doesn't happen like they planned.
Oh.
Kirk immediately realizes he's been outmaneuvered. Anticipated. He must have guessed our move, he acknowledges. And there's this moment, this flash of grudging respect for his adversary's tactical mind. You did exactly what I would have done, he admits.
Acknowledging the enemy's skill.
Yeah. And he vows, I won't underestimate him again. This fleeting acknowledgement between commanders, even as enemies, it's a fascinating little detail in the text.
But he can't dwell on it, right? He's faced with the imminent threat of losing the target, the Romulan ship potentially escaping into the comet or setting that ambush. So Kirk makes a desperate counter-order.
What does he do?
Without a visual target, he orders the ship to fire blind, lay down a pattern. It's a purely speculative attack, a gamble, basically just spraying phaser fire into the comet, hoping to hit the invisible target by sheer luck.
And does it work?
We don't know immediately if it hits, but this speculative attack, firing powerful weapons without a lock, comes at a cost to the Enterprise itself. The source notes the phaser system suffers technical issues, a phase overload control circuit burnout.
So there's a tangible price for firing blinds.
Yeah.
Even their own tech has limits and vulnerabilities under stress. It's not just the enemy ship that has technological weaknesses.
Exactly. So with that immediate maneuvering sort of resolved, or at least paused, and the outcome uncertain, the narrative shifts focus. We move into a briefing room discussion aboard the Enterprise. This isn't about executing immediate orders anymore. It's about analyzing the situation, pulling together the limited info they have, and figuring out the absolutely critical next course of action.
And the summary findings laid out is pretty stark, pretty concerning. The Romulan weaponry is confirmed, superior described as an enveloping energy plasma forcing an implosion.
Oof.
Yeah. And they undeniably possess a practical invisibility screen. So the military minds, they immediately jump to tactics. How do we counter this?
But Dr. McCoy, the ship's doctor, quickly injects that dose of reality, doesn't he? A reminder of the true stakes, beyond just the tech and tactics. Do you realize what this really comes down to? He asks, cutting through the jargon. Millions and millions of lives hanging on what this vessel does next.
It's such a vital, humanizing grounding point right in the middle of this cold strategic debate.
Yeah. And the arguments that follow are a really fascinating insight into the different philosophies and pressures at play within that command crew. Stiles, again, is the voice of immediate aggressive action. We have to attack immediately, he insists.
And his justification is purely based on the treaty violation, right?
Exactly. They are undeniably on our side of the neutral zone. That proves they broke the treaty. He dismisses the invisibility problem, arguing they can aim with sensors. If we blanket them, we can. Just overwhelm them.
But his core argument isn't just about hitting back for the outpost, is it? It's about preventing what he sees as an inevitable future war by acting now.
Right. He's convinced that if they don't attack, if the Romulans get away and report that we saw their weapons and ran, it basically guarantees war anyway. They'll be back, he argues, not just one ship, but with everything they've got. So for Stiles, doing nothing, showing any perceived weakness, that's the path that guarantees a devastating war later. Fighting now, even blindly, is the only way to potentially avoid that larger conflict.
And then Spock, the science officer, adds another complex layer, bringing his unique background into it. While he ultimately agrees they probably need to engage the Romulan ship, he provides crucial cultural context based on his expertise. He suggests that if Romulans are indeed an offshoot of my Vulcan blood, which is a theory he puts forward, then attack becomes even more imperative. He elaborates on a piece of Vulcan history mentioned in the source, an aggressive colonizing period, savage, even by Earth's standards.
These savage Vulcans, hard to imagine sometimes.
Well, according to this source, yes. And his chilling conclusion is that if the Romulans retain this martial philosophy, this inherent aggressive drive that the Vulcans apparently suppressed within themselves, then weakness is something we dare not show. Showing weakness in that interpretation wouldn't deter them. It would only invite more, possibly more devastating, aggression down the line.
But McCoy pushes back hard against that logic, doesn't he? Especially the historical and theoretical basis for going to war right now. He directly challenges those assumptions. Are you suggesting we fight to prevent a fight? He asks. Based on what? Memories of a war over a century ago. On theories about a people we've never even met face to face.
Yeah, he really highlights the profound unknowns about the Romulans as they are now, not just as they were a century ago or as their distant relatives might have been. He questions the wisdom of potentially igniting a galactic war based on speculation and old grudges.
And it's in this heated debate that Styles' earlier prejudice kind of bubbles up more explicitly. He interjects, challenging Spock directly about why he hadn't shared the Vulcan offshoot theory before. You're the expert in these people, Styles says, and his tone sounds accusatory in the text. But you've always left out that one point. Why? I'm very interested in why.
Ooh, yeah, that's a loaded question. It implies suspicion about Spock's motives, or maybe even his loyalties, purely based on his heritage.
And it's at this point the captain steps in decisively, just cuts through the bigotry. Leave any bigotry in your quarters, he orders sharply. There's no room for it on the bridge.
Which is such a critical moment. It shows the conflict isn't just external, against the enemy ship. It's also an internal struggle within the crew itself, grappling with ingrained biases, the legacy of past conflicts. The captain isn't just managing the external threat. He's managing these internal tensions and prejudices too.
Absolutely. And all of this intense debate is happening under a serious time crunch. The ship's position relative to the neutral zone boundary is reported less than an hour away. Less than an hour.
Okay.
And the Romulan ship is still heading towards it, presumably seeking safety or sanctuary or maybe a tactical advantage behind their own border. Kirk knows he has to make a decision, commit to a course of action before they reach that line. Before the enemy potentially escapes or gets the protection of the treaty boundary they already violated to attack.
The clock is ticking.
Seriously ticking. The decision is made, and the bridge confirms it. Estimating treaty boundary in 21 minutes. They are proceeding, still tracking the Romulan ship, closing the distance as that deadline approaches.
And adding to the immense weight of this decision is the communication lag with command base. A report comes in stating it will be approximately 3 hours before receiving a reply to our first message.
3 hours.
Yeah. This detail is crucial. It just underscores the complete isolation of the Enterprise at this moment. There's no time for consultation, no chance for immediate backup or guidance from higher authority. The burden of deciding the fate of potentially millions, the decision of whether or not to risk galactic war, rests entirely and solely on the captain in command of this single ship.
Wow. That's immense pressure.
Unbelievable pressure.
Yeah.
But despite the challenges and the unknowns, their observations have provided a crucial tactical advantage, a vulnerability in the enemy's advanced tech. Based on the Romulan ship briefly becoming visible when it fired and that report of its weapon needing immense power,
Right.
they've deduced what the text calls their Achilles heel. Their weapon takes all their energy. They must become visible in order to launch it.
Okay, so that's the key.
That's the key. The strategy solidifies around this point. They can't effectively attack an invisible target, but they know the enemy must make itself vulnerable to use its primary weapon. So the plan is now to wait, to track relentlessly, and to strike only when the Romulan ship exposes itself by becoming visible to fire.
And so the stage is set for the final confrontation. The Enterprise, operating under these strict treaty constraints, totally isolated from command, its crew grappling with fear and prejudice, is closing in on this technologically superior, unseen Romulan vessel, tracking it relentlessly as it heads towards the neutral zone border, just waiting for that moment of vulnerability.
And meanwhile, on the Romulan ship, the commander is aware of the pursuit. He knows they're still there.
Mm-hmm.
He's there somewhere. I feel it, he states. His instincts confirm the Earth ship is still shadowing them. He senses that they are being beaten, not in a direct fight, but in this strategic game of endurance. Their fuel is running critically low for the cloak, and the Earth ship just maintains its position, stays just out of reach, refusing to engage when they're cloaked and relatively safe.
But his duty, his sense of honor, compels him, right? Surrender, he states. That is not our way.
Not an option for him. So facing potential failure and with limited options, the Romulan commander resorts to a desperate, frankly cold-blooded deception tactic.
Yeah.
He orders all debris into disposal.
Debris.
Yeah. And in a chilling moment described in the source, the body of the Centurion who died earlier is also jettisoned with the debris.
What? No way.
Yeah. The commander rationalizes this grim act with brutal pragmatism, stating, "Forgive me, my old friend, but I must use all my experience now to get home." He's literally using his fallen comrade's body as part of a trap.
That's horrifying. What's the trap?
The crucial, horrifying detail about this jettisoned debris is revealed. The Romulan ship apparently has old-style nuclear warheads aboard, only for self-destruction. Old ones, yeah. The commander orders one of these warheads, placed with the debris, and set with a proximity fuse. This is a final, desperate, and potentially devastating act of war, a hidden nuclear trap designed to destroy or cripple the Enterprise when it gets close enough to investigate the jettisoned material.
Oh my God. So the Enterprise detects the debris field. They move in to check it out.
Right, they're performing an analysis, probably still looking for the ship itself, but they find something else. The key detection is one metal-cased object.
The warhead.
The realization is immediate and chilling. It's not simple debris, it's not the ship, it's a trick. Kirk's reaction is instantaneous, born of realizing the deadly trap they nearly flew into. "Hell, hard over," he yells, ordering evasive action. Phasers fire, point blank. They fire on the metal-cased object, trying to detonate that nuclear device at a distance before it can get them.
Do they manage it?
The Enterprise's quick reaction prevents a direct hit, thankfully. But the detonation at close range still inflicts significant damage, though apparently not crippling, according to the source. They sustain mainly overloads and circuit burnouts across their systems. There are radiation burns from the ship's outer areas, resulting in 22 so far, casualties reported.
22
Casualties. Yeah. And the doctor notes it could have been much, much worse, emphasizing just how close they came to complete destruction from that trap.
And the damage severely impacts the ship's function, right? Only one key system remains fully operational.
Exactly. Only the forward phaser room, Captain, and it's manned by just one person, a specialist Tomlinson. Alone. No standby crew available. He's in a critical, incredibly vulnerable position.
Tomlinson, okay.
And it's in this moment of crisis and injury that we see Styles, the character who earlier showed such strong prejudice, take an unexpected action.
Styles again, what does he do?
Despite the danger, despite his previous attitude towards Spock and presumably the enemy, he volunteers to go to the forward phaser room to assist Tomlinson. He simply states his qualification. "My first assignment was in weapons control."
Wow, okay.
It's a moment where, perhaps, duty overrides prejudice. Or maybe prejudice is challenged by the immediate reality of shared danger and the need for expertise.
Interesting twist for him. Meanwhile, back on the Romulan ship, they initially think their trap worked, right?
They do. Glorious. Glorious. Now we go home. "They are at our mercy," the commander exclaims. He's convinced the Enterprise is crippled or destroyed, but their hope of just escaping home is challenged by the Centurion's replacement.
Oh.
This new guy embodies that rigid sense of Romulan duty. He reminds the commander of their obligation to crush the Prior's enemies, urging him to turn back and finish off the supposedly disabled Earth ship inside the neutral zone.
So push the attack even further, violate the treaty again.
Exactly. He's pushing for total victory, even at the risk of a second, more blatant incursion into the zone.
And critically, in that moment, while they believe victory is theirs and they're preparing for the final kill, the Romulan ship becomes visible again. Enemy vessel gunning visible, sir. The report comes on the Enterprise bridge. Maybe engaging offensive systems, maybe the commander's decision to attack required dropping the cloak. Whatever the reason, their vulnerability is exposed.
And the Enterprise, despite its damage, is ready.
Ready. Forward phasers stand by, Kirk orders. Focused, prepared.
And the final exchange unfolds rapidly. The Enterprise fires its one working phaser bank. And then Kirk makes this remarkable decision that kind of transcends the brutality of the fight.
What's that?
He opens hailing frequencies to his defeated enemy. He doesn't demand surrender. He offers terms, offers mercy. Standing by to beam your survivors aboard our ship, prepared to abandon your vessel. It's an offer to save lives, a path to avoid total destruction for them.
Even after everything they did.
Even after everything. But the Romulan commander's response is absolute, defined by his rigid sense of duty and his way. No, that is not our way, he replied.
Well,
in his final moments, he recognizes something in his adversary, maybe a kindred spirit forged in command and pressure. "I regret that we meet in this way," he says to Kirk. "You and I are of a kind. In a different reality, I could have called you friend."
that's poignant, almost tragic.
It really is. An acknowledgement of a shared burden, a mutual understanding across enemy lines, but ultimately, duty prevails over any potential connection. "We are creatures of duty," he states. "I have lived my life by it. Just one more duty to perform." And he chooses self-destruction. annihilation over the perceived dishonor of capture or surrender. His ship explodes.
Gone. The immediate aftermath on the Enterprise bridge brings the human cost sharply back into focus, doesn't it? Casualties are reported. The doctor's voice, the text implies, is heavy as he gives the final number. Only one, he says.
Only one.
And then the name. Tomlinson, the boy who's going to get married this morning. His fiancée is waiting at the chapel. It's just a raw, brutal reminder that even in a tactical victory, lives are lost. The boy who was supposed to start his future is gone.
Hits hard. And we see that final, incredibly layered interaction between Spock and Styles, who work together in that dangerous phaser room. Styles, moments after surviving, asks Spock if he's all right, acknowledging that Spock saved him. He pulled me out of the phaser room, Styles says, kind of grappling with the reality. Saved my life. He risked his life.
Mm-hmm.
And he adds, clearly wrestling with his earlier prejudice, and after I.
Yeah, you could feel the weight of that.
Definitely. And Spock's response, on the surface, is pure logic. I saved a trained navigator so that he could return to duty. I'm capable of no other feelings in such matters. But beneath the words, it's such a powerful moment, isn't it?
Oh, so.
Well, Spock didn't lecture Styles about bigotry. He simply, selflessly saved his life. He demonstrated competence, courage, value that just transcends Styles' earlier prejudiced assumptions. It challenges Styles' whole worldview through action, not argument.
That's a really good point. Actions speak louder. And then the final word comes from command base, illustrating perfectly the isolation Kirk felt during the whole crisis.
What do they say?
They say they'll support whatever decision you have to make, the report comes. And the captain's quiet reaction just never makes any sense. Perfectly captures that immense, lonely weight of command responsibility. The decision, the risk, the lives saved or lost it all rested solely on him. And only now, after it's all over, does command offer their retroactive support for the decision already made under impossible pressure and isolation.
Yeah, thanks for the backup now, basically. So, pulling back from the specific events, what can we synthesize from all this? What are the core insights we can extract from this deep dive into this, well, really dramatic historical narrative?
Okay, let's unpack the takeaways.
Firstly, I think we see clearly the profound danger posed by historical baggage and unseen enemies in escalating conflict. Those assumptions born from a century without visual contact. They fueled suspicion and aggression on both sides, making rational assessment incredibly difficult. Styles' prejudice, the Romulan commander's pre-existing hostility, they seem like direct consequences of that historical chasm.
Mm-hmm.
We also see vastly different philosophies of command and duty, right? Exemplified by Kirk and the Romulan commander. Kirk operates within strict constraints, prioritizes avoiding wider war, seeks tactical advantage, even offers mercy when he could just destroy them.
Right.
The Romulan commander, though, seems driven by an absolute, maybe even self-destructive sense of duty and this perceived need to prove strength. He views any caution or restraint as weakness, and their choices lead them to very different fates. One survives to continue, the other chooses annihilation.
Yeah, stark contrast. And the practical implications of a neutral zone and a treaty are really underscored here too. They're powerful symbols of peace, boundaries, but they're ultimately only as strong as the will of the parties to uphold them.
True.
Violating them, even when provoked, comes with immense consequences, pushing both sides right to the absolute brink of total war. And the decision of when and if to cross that line, even in defense, is just agonizing.
And technology itself, it's portrayed as a double-edged sword in this narrative, isn't it? The Romulan invisibility cloak lets them strike unseen, but it has severe limitations, consumes enormous power, maybe linked to their weapons function.
The Achilles heel.
Exactly. Their powerful weapon, capable of pulverizing outposts, requires them to become visible, creating the crucial vulnerability that the Enterprise exploits. Their technological strength comes with an inherent exploitable weakness.
And the internal struggles within the crew. Prejudice, fear, duty, courage, the weight of command. They seem to mirror the external conflict. The personal baggage and biases of individuals like Styles clearly play a role in how the overall situation is perceived and reacted to. And moments like Spock saving Styles highlight how those biases can be challenged, maybe even overcome, by shared experience and direct action.
And perhaps most importantly, the narrative just keeps underscoring the inevitable human cost of conflict. Regardless of the strategic outcome, regardless of who wins the tactical engagement. Tomlinson's death, the 22 casualties from the near miss, the Centurion's body callously used in a trap. These moments remind us that behind all the strategies and technologies are individuals whose lives are dramatically, tragically impacted.
It's clear this wasn't just a straightforward fight between two ships at all. It was this complex interplay of strategy, deception, technological limits, the deep legacy of history, and the personalities and philosophies of the commanders involved. This deep dive really shows that understanding your enemy, even when they are completely unknown to you personally or defined only by a history of conflict, is absolutely crucial to survival and successful command.
And connecting this back to, our own experiences or just thinking about decision making.
Yeah.
This narrative offers a potent example of the pressures we face when forced to make decisions with limited information and incredibly high stakes. How much do historical contexts or ingrained beliefs or even unconscious biases subtly influence our judgment in critical moments? This story really challenges us to consider that, doesn't it?
It really does. So, based strictly on the source material, what have we learned about the Romulans involved in this specific encounter? We know they possess undeniably advanced technology, a practical cloaking device, a powerful energy weapon.
Very advanced.
They're strategically capable, using deception, testing their adversaries' reactions, operating under a strict command structure. They appeared driven by a strong, perhaps unforgiving sense of duty and honor, willing to choose self-destruction over perceived weakness or surrender.
Yeah, that not our way line is powerful.
And they seem to operate under what Spock termed that martial philosophy, where showing any sign of weakness is simply unacceptable, maybe even invites further aggression. That seems to be the picture painted here.
That's the takeaway from this text, yeah.
And there you have it, our deep dive into this critical, really tense first encounter. From a moment of peaceful celebration abruptly broken, through a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, a fierce debate right on the brink of war, and a deadly final confrontation right at the neutral zone boundary.
It vividly illustrates the incredibly difficult choices the commander faced under immense pressure, bound by the rigid constraints of a treaty, yet staring down a clear act of war by an unknown, technologically superior adversary who, frankly, seemed intent on triggering a wider conflict.
And it leaves us with a powerful thought, I think, based on the themes explored. In situations involving unknown adversaries and these sensitive boundaries, how much should the conflicts and assumptions of the past dictate present actions? And, maybe more pointedly, at what point does adhering strictly to rules and protocols, even a century-old treaty, become a greater risk than adapting to the brutal reality of the threat right in front of you?
That's the question, isn't it? And reflecting on the Romulan commander's final words before choosing self-destruction, you and I are of a kind. In a different reality, I could have called you friend. It makes you wonder. Was there a missed opportunity for understanding, maybe even connection, despite the undeniable aggression and their rigid adherence to duty? What if circumstances had just been slightly different? A lingering what if?
A huge what if. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. It's a complex story with just so many layers to unpack.
Always more to learn, always more to understand about history, and maybe ourselves too.
Keep exploring, keep questioning. We'll see you on the next one.